Thank you. Welcome. I call to order the Town Council Budget Work Session. This is our first work session. The date is March 3rd, and the time is 6:38. If we could please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I just want to let everyone know that Councilman Paul Donnelly is not feeling well tonight, so he will not be with us. So our regards to him. And on our agenda tonight, it's the 2014-15 Town Manager's proposed budget message. And then we will get into the general fund accounts, Town Council to Zoning Board of Review and Town Hall, and Public Library Services, and we always have other matters of interest or concern. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Alfred in his bright yellow shirt. Sunny.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight, we're going to walk through the budget message and several of the accounts up through the library and the town hall accounts. I want to walk through the message because I think the message provides a good synopsis of what is proposed in the budget, what the cost implications are associated with the budgeted items, and where do the costs and where do the revenues come from. So let's start out on page 1 of the message. On page 1 of the message, we're showing all of the funds that are included in the town manager's budget. That includes the general fund, school fund, the 3 enterprise funds, water, wastewater, solid waste, and 3 of our special revenue funds for Peacedale offices, Neighborhood Guild, and the Senior Services Program. In total cost, net of money which goes in one fund and comes out through another fund, the recommended and proposed cost of operating municipal services for the 2014-15 year will be $90,362,264. That's a $461,000 increase over the current year, or 0.51%, or 0.5% of an increase. We're going to concentrate specifically tonight on the general fund. The 2014-15 general fund recommended budget is at $74,858,524, which is a $663,184 increase over the current year's appropriation. In looking at page 2 of the message provides a detailed summary. I want to point out at the beginning of the discussion this evening that I'm presenting the 2013-14 year budget as a restated budget. Now, the reason that we've got a restated budget is that with the changes in the financial management system and the new chart of accounts that we're using, what we have attempted to do is to provide a greater explanation as to what the true costs are of each individual municipal service by including the cost associated with not just the personnel in each of the functional areas, but also what the fringe benefit costs are associated with those persons. So essentially, the police department budget includes all of the salaries in the 2012-13 year, but it doesn't include the costs associated with health care, with life insurance, with retirement, with FICA or Social Security. So what we've done is we've restated each of the operating budget accounts to be inclusive of those dollars associated with the benefits. In that manner, we're able to see what the true cost is of operating the police department, the true cost of operating the canvassing authority or the town clerk's office. We've also, in the new chart of accounts, provided a much greater delineation on the revenue sources and also presented those by department so that we can see how much money is coming in through fees that come through the town clerk's office. So what the true cost of the clerk's office is, plus the true cost of the revenues that are associated with the different services that are provided through that department. So you will see the word restated on each of the budget years for the 13-14 year. We've restated the budget so that there's a valid comparison to what's being proposed in the 14-15 year. Because obviously, if we were taking the police department's budget as it was originally adopted without fringe benefits at approximately $4.5 million and showed a police budget going up to $8 million, it wouldn't be a realistic presentation of what full costs are or a comparison as to what type of a percentage increase over the current year is being presented. So we've restated every one of our object codes in each of the budget items. And when we ask the council to adopt a budget this year for the 14-15 year, we will also ask for a separate resolution, which will be an adoption of the amendments for the restated budget as presented in your budget document that's being presented to the council for consideration for the 14-15 year. So when we look at the operating program for next year, we're looking at the general fund operations going up about 3.15% or $595,000. A lion's share of that cost is directly associated with increased pension costs, particularly those associated with the police department, where that cost is going up approximately, I believe, over $300,000. So we'll get that to that when we go through each of the individual accounts. We're also seeing miscellaneous transfers being reduced. That's because a number of the transfers that were coming in are no longer necessary, because what we've also done is to assign personnel costs, which in the past have been resident to the general fund, to the departments that we're actually servicing. So the town manager's salary, for instance, only 85% of that salary is included in the general fund for next year. The other 15%, 5% will be budgeted within the water department, and 10% will be within the wastewater department. Also, the benefits associated with those shared positions will also be distributed to those proper accounts. When we do that, it means that the transfers that those funds used to pay to the general fund will no longer be necessary. But what it also does is give a truer cost as to where we're spending money. Essentially, we overstate what the value of the general fund is if we're budgeting for services that are rendered in other departments and then bringing revenue in to offset that cost. So what we're trying to do is to provide a truer cost of what specific services are within the town. Debt service, we've talked about that in our capital budget, will be down next year, both in the municipal debt service and also the school debt service as shown on that chart. Capital budget is based on what was adopted by the council in January, which is a $54,000 increase over the base year funding provided in 13-14. So when we look at it, the overall general fund, inclusive of the operating program, the capital program, and the transfers, will amount to a 0.89 or a 0.9% increase over the current year, or $663,000. The school program will be going up $104,000. $482,000 will be going more to the operations of the school, but with a major reduction in debt service for the 14-15 year, there'll be a reduction of $378,000, so it nets to 104 or a 0.2% increase. So we're talking about a 0.89% increase overall. You can see with the revenue statement that's on this chart that we're looking at the property taxes needing to increase to support that budget by $806,000 or 1.2%. This is well below the 2% that we used in the forecast when we did the pro forma back in December. And as we indicated in December, our objective was to use that as a pro forma to show what implications would be there if we went to 2. but also to be able to then realistically look at, could we reduce that below the 2, which we have? So we're looking at an $806,000. You're seeing a $74,000 decrease on the transfers. And again, that goes back to the restated budget, where we've got water, wastewater, and solid waste no longer providing revenue to reimburse cost of service. When we see the loss on the $77,000 on local revenues, there were 2 items that were in the enterprise funds. One was to pay for services associated with personnel and benefits, and the second cost was to pay for reimbursement of costs associated with general ledger, payroll, audit, those types of things. So there's an additional $77,000 that's no longer necessary to be transferred in. We're also seeing a $137,000 increase in state aid. The reason that we're seeing that, and we didn't speculate that that would be available in December, is because the state, last year when we developed the municipal program, the governor's budget was on the table last year. That money that was on the table was a $10 million proposal that would have provided $288,000 to the town. We took that out of the council's budget because the General Assembly was not in favor of that program. By the time they passed their budget in June, they took the $10 million proposed by the governor, reduced it to $5 million, and we are entitled to $144,000. So because of that $144,000 in the current year, our revenues are over what we budgeted for, and they will also be over in the 2014 year, so that's why we're seeing that sizable increase in state aid. And I'll show you that as we go through the budget message when we get to the state revenue. Back to property tax. The property tax rate that would be necessary to support this budget would be at $15.51, up 4 cents or 1.2% over the current year rate of $15.47. So what we're looking at is a decrease of 8 cents on school effort. That's because of the debt service reductions of the $378,000 that I've already mentioned, and also a 12-cent increase necessary to meet the municipal costs that are presented here. One other major revenue reduction that we're proposing this year is to cut back undesignated fund balance being forwarded to the 14-15 year. In the current year, we had $1 million. What we've recommended is to reduce that by 175 down to the 825. The reason that I'm recommending that is that from a budgetary perspective, and this was mentioned the other night when we talked about the audit, Moody's and government accounting looks at the fact that if money is in your fund balance, it's not new money. Therefore, they would report a deficit operation because you have less revenue coming in than you're expending. What we're attempting to do is to get to a point where the amount of undesignated funds will be less so that any surplus that we return would be greater than what designated funds are being forwarded, so that we would be in a positive position on each year when we close the books. We're never running a deficit. What we're doing is we're using money from fund balance. So what we're asking to do is to reduce that. 2 years ago, it was at 1.2 million. We brought it down to $1 million. Now we're looking to bring it down to about 825. It can stay in that general area from here forward, and I don't think that there'll be future adjustments recommended, but it also provides us with a relief valve if we were to need to increase that for some specific purpose in the future. So at this point, this budget, as presented, would require a 4-cent increase over the existing rate. Well, what does that mean to the average homeowner? On page 3 of the budget message, I've taken what the value is of the average house in South Kingstown. And again, when I say average residential assessment, that is the average. That means that 50% are above and 50% are below. So when we look at that, The average tax bill this year was $5,087 for that typical house. It would increase by $12.81 in the 14-15 year were the budget adopted as presented in the manager's budget document tonight. The next section, and let me do this for Jim because Jim always asks the question. 1 cent on the tax rate will generate $41,515. $1 million in new assessment value will generate $15,510. So when we look at the fact that we are adding approximately $40 million to the tax roll, essentially what we're looking at is that about $620,000 of the overall $802,000 in new taxes would be coming out of a new tax base. So the remainder would be coming out of either the motor vehicles or out of that 4 cents. So again, here's a distribution that shows where the 1.2% or the $802,000 would be were the budget adopted as presented. Moving on to page 4. Page 4 provides a explanation as to where do the different elements of the budget, what impacts do they have on the property tax net of the revenues that are generated specific for those purposes. So you can see that the tax transfer to the schools, which is $47.9 million, net of the revenues that come in from debt service or from third-party revenues that are in the school fund, that their rate would stay at $11.55. The school debt service is down 8 cents. Municipal debt service is flat. The capital budget would add 3 cents, and the operating fund 10. So the net, and again, it gets distorted because of rounding, because we go 4 places after the decimal in determining tax rates, is approximately 4 cents is the net increase that we're looking at next year. And you can see where the cost centers are reflected in that chart. The next chart provides a history of the property tax levy over the past 5 years. And you can see that the tax levy has not exceeded 1.54% in any of those years. We're looking at over a 5-year period, if the budget was adopted as presented this evening, that the average annual tax rate increase or tax levy increase would be 1.03%, or essentially a 1% per year increase each year for the 5 years. I'm going to go quickly through the maximum property tax levy because I don't think it's really important. The state law says that the municipalities cannot increase their taxes by more than 4%. What this chart does is say, okay, what's the maximum that we could have raised taxes that we haven't raised taxes? It could have been raised from $15.47 up to $15.96, or approximately $1.9 million more in taxes would have been available at a 4% rate. As I've said to the council in previous meetings, that is a cap, it's not something to be aspired to, it's something that would limit a municipality. That's not something South Kingstown is looking to get close to at any time. Moving on to page 5 of the message. Page 5 of the message looks at the growth in the property tax. And here what we're seeing is that the municipal program is growing in terms of its dependence or share of the property tax levy from 23.3% up to 24%. So approximately 70 basis points more is coming to the municipal program versus the school program. Why? Obviously, with the school program seeing less students, the need for increases in that budget are considerably less. In fact, the school budget next year is proposed to decrease by about $23,000 from what was budgeted in the current year. Yet at the same time, it will take a full 1% increase in property taxes to support that budget, based on revenue losses, particularly coming from the state budget. And we'll look at that a little bit later in this message. So you can see that what we're looking at is an increase in terms of the budget, again, of that $802,000. This presents it in a different way. People look at taxes in different ways. They want to see how it affects municipal and school programs, or they want to see how it affects the tax bill that the resident's going to get. I'm trying to present it in all those different modes for full disclosure purposes. I want to talk next about the property tax roll and what we see with the property tax roll. On the bottom of page M5 is a table that shows the projected taxable property for the 14-15 year. What we're looking at there is an estimated $40,035,000 increase in taxable property. As of the day that the budget was released last Thursday, we were at $40,900,000. So we're already ahead of that mark, and we still have a little bit of additional property that will be added to the roll. So that number should be a given number. The only qualifier I would put on that is that tangible property reportings are not, do not have to be made until March 15th. If we saw a sizable decrease, as we have over the past 3 years, from one of our largest industrial concerns, we may have to get additional property to be able to meet those numbers that are here. But at this point, we're not anticipating any major takedowns. If they occur, hopefully they will be reported by the March 15th date, and we will be able to make appropriate adjustments when the council deals with the final budgets by the end of April. But at this point, new property added to the roll of both on a commercial and residential base is at about $40.9 million in new taxable. If we were to lose on the tangibles, I think the most we would probably be looking at is somewhere in the area of $4 to $5 million. And I'm not sure. I have no way of judging that at this point. Motor vehicles, that's also a placeholder at this point. As you can see, in the current year, it was $185.8 million. I brought that up about $1.1 million, and so that's why we're looking at an overall of about 41.1. It's still very early for me to be able to get hard numbers on taxable property rolls. Certainly, because we're not going to certify the roll until June 15th, there's a great deal more work the tax assessment must do to be able to come to final numbers there. However, I do feel comfortable with the numbers that I've seen to date, and I think we're on the right track to be able to hit the numbers that we've got presented here, unless something major comes along in the tangible property classification. When we move on with the motor vehicles, again, I'm also recommending that the council maintain the $3,000 value exemption for the 2014-2015 year. We will only be getting about $146,000, I think, in reimbursement from the state for that exemption, because they're only paying on the first $500 in exemption. The next section on page M6 deals with the property tax levy adjustments. There are really 4 adjustments that have to be added onto our tax levy on an annual basis. One is to recognize that 100% of taxes won't be collected, and we call that a tax overlay. So essentially, we have to raise 1.4% more taxes than we need so that we actually collect 100% of what our need statement is. That 1.4% is down from 1.42% in the current year and amounts to about $932,000. The good news is that any money that we don't collect in the year that it's actually levied is received in the following year as a prior year tax as a revenue. And in fact, we have, I think, $545,000 anticipated in prior year taxes for next year. The second component is a reserve for erroneous assessments of $120,000, same number that we've used for the last several years. And third is the $340,000 reserve on the elderly property tax abatement program. Current year cost us around $315,000, and we're anticipating that the target is still $340,000. One positive takedown on levy value is proration of taxes, where we're anticipating that we will collect $100,000 in taxes that aren't on the certified tax roll, but are added to the roll subsequent to certification on June 15th. And this would be for property as of December 31st that is completed in the 2014 calendar year, and we take a prorated value. So if a house was on the roll under construction and the building value was only $100,000 and the house was finished on July 1st, then we would look at it, and let's say the value was now $200,000, we would prorate that $200,000 for the 6 months and collect extra taxes on that prorated amount. In past years, we've seen as low as $85,000. We've seen as high as, I think, about $150,000. We've used a midpoint of the 100, which is the same that we used in the current year. Moving on to page M7, we also provide a property tax collection, and this looks at the overlay, the erroneous assessments, the elderly tax abatement costs, and shows you how do you get to the levy. So what we're looking at is a tax levy that would be equal to $67,884,000. That's the 1.2%. And what we're expecting is, or budgeting for, is a 98.1% collection rate of current year. That means that the taxes would be collected any time within a 14-month period from the time that they were levied, between July 1st of 2014 and September 1st of 2015. The reason I use the extra 2 months is because we operate with a modified accrual basis of accounting, and with that modified basis of accrual, we take a 60-day rule where anything collected 60 days after the close of the fiscal year is part of current year revenues. The next section of the message deals with payments in lieu of taxes or pilot income. This provides the council and the public with those entities that are not paying property taxes or reduced property taxes and what they're paying for payments in lieu of taxes. As you can see, the major provider is through South County Hospital. The others organizations, the Housing Authority under federal requirements pays us a portion of any unused funds for the year. That we're estimating at about $10,000. The Camp Jury, Land Trust, and Welcome House have pilot agreements with the town that the council signs off on a yearly basis. And the latter two, La Casa and Bayberry, under state statute pay us 8% of the value of their income for rental income. So these are the values that would come in where property taxes are not being collected specifically from those properties. On South County Hospital, this is just on the administration building, the medical arts building. It's not on the hospital proper. If we move on to page 9, on page 9, did I skip a page here? Oh, page 8, I guess I should do that one. Transfer to other funds. What we're looking at here is the thing I've mentioned earlier, is that monies that were coming from water, wastewater, and solid waste won't be coming into those transfers because of the adjustments in the way we're budgeting. You can see that the other dollars that are on transfers are things that the council approves through the capital improvement program, where fair share development fees, South Road Reserve Fund, open space, and fair share fees all come from those special revenue funds that hold money that is used to pay down debt services. The latter part of the page 8 shows transfers that are coming to reimburse the general fund for specific services provided with the school department. And that includes the field maintenance on both the football field and hazard field, heat detectors, which is the communications department with general maintenance that they provide on their heat detectors, the crossing guards that comes out of the police department budget, and financial services of $25,000. It is a misnomer to show $116,000 for financial services there, because that's not just the school department. In the 13-14 year, that $116,000 really was inclusive of the monies coming in from the utility funds as well. So that's not a valid comparison at the $91,000, but when we brought that financial services IT in, we brought it in to the finance department as a future revenue, and so where the tail end of it for the current year was showing at what the full value would be from those utility funds.
Steve?
Sure.
Steve, the reduction showing in the school crossing guards of $2,220, is that a cut in the school crossing guards or money coming in from other sources?
No, it's based on taking a look at, many times if a crossing guard's ill or not available, a police officer will man that site, and there will be less of a cost. So this was just a minimal reduction based on what we're seeing as actual experience.
Steve, along with that, how do we contract the crossing guards? Is there an hourly, is there a seasonal?
It's on an
How's it
hourly
done?
rate that's in the police department budget, and each of them goes through a program review before we'll put them out on the street. If you know anybody that's interested in the program, we've got a waiting list.
Wow.
Let's all do that.
Moving on to page 9. Page 9, and again, I apologize, I gave you a new page 9 tonight because some of my links we're not doing what they were supposed to be doing. And so I had a couple of the links that were inaccurate, so you've got the accurate count now. What we're looking at overall is about 137,000, as I mentioned earlier. The major change is the 144,000 that'll be coming in the state incentive aid. I can run through all of the state aids and the woes of the world. General revenue sharing, where we were collecting over $1 million a year, is at 0. And the pilot money, which started at 27% of the value, is down to 22%. But it's still $154,000 that we don't have to get from property tax. The state incentive aid, when I talk about the incentive aid is a program which was really targeted by the governor and then the General Assembly, certainly at a lesser dollar amount, the $5 million level, to provide assistance to municipalities that were underfunded, had underfunded pension systems. And if a community like South Kingstown did not have pension issues to have to deal with, then it came as a general revenue. The money was distributed based on proportionate value of our population to the overall state population based on the federal census of 2010. So as long as that program stays in place, we should see roughly the same amount of money. Again, we're going to have to watch that one closely through April to ensure that we don't see erosion of that $5 million program as we did last year. Moving on to page 10. Page 10 also provides some historical perspective on the Public Services Corporation tax, which is the personal property of tangible and cable companies. It's collected on a statewide basis and again distributed based on population. The meals tax, we're recommending an increase there of another $25,000 to an estimated $675,000 in income from that 1% tax. And that's on all prepared foods and meals that served by any school food provider, food services provider. in the calendar year. The hotel tax is a 6% tax of which we get 33 1/3% or 2%. What we're estimating is that we'll take in $135,000 in that program, which is up about $15,000, I believe, from the current year. When we look at the reimbursement programs from the state, school housing is down by $32,007, but the reason it's down is because our debt service costs are down. The motor vehicle phase-out, as I mentioned earlier, the state allegedly is reimbursing us on a $500 per vehicle value. We're providing a $3,000 value credit. So the $146,000 is what is forecast for next year. What the state did 2 years ago is they put a $10 million cap on what they distribute, and based on a formula, they assign how much money is going to each of the cities and towns. But in no case do they consider any values that are more than the $500 as, for reimbursement purposes. There is no library construction aid forecast in 14-15. In the 13-14 year, that was our final year on reimbursement of the bond that we had outstanding on our library. The bond's been retired at this point, so there's no further debt service required. As such, there's no more reimbursement provided through that funding source.
Steve, before you move on, can you just give me a very fast history on the hotel tax? I mean, there's obviously a 7% sales tax, but how did this 6% surcharge come to be, and when did it all happen, and why?
It was in place several years ago, and it was amended, I think it was about 4 years ago, Jim, where they, the distribution, and I've listed it on page 10, where right now we get the 2% of the revenues, 39.2% then go to the Tourism Council, which would be the South County Tourism Council would get their share. 5% goes to the Roger Williams Reserve Fund, which is at Roger Williams Park. And the remaining 22.5% go to the Economic Development Corporation. That's the distribution that's there. I don't recall how many years ago that modification was made, but the 2% has been, I think, a constant number for the last several years.
I was just trying to remember back, the tourism budget up there used to be $3, $4, $5 million. Now it's negligible. So I didn't know if that was their way of passing out to places like Providence and Newport and Warwick.
No, I think that they're still getting the regional tourism dollars, and they're getting a larger share than the municipalities are at that 39.2%. But again, it's within your community, so you know, we have limitations based on the number of bed and breakfasts we have and the 2 major hotels. But you know, when you look at it, if we're correct in 135,000, that would translate it at 2% to about $7.5 million in actual sales occurring in the course of the year, or about $20,000 a day. So that's you know, that's a large source. You look at meals tax. I mean, if meal tax is going to generate $675,000 at 1%, you're talking about $67.5 million for the year in business, and that's $185,000 a year. I mean, a day, on a 365-day year, if my math's correct. Any other questions on that, Jim?
No, I just
I mean, I can get you a history on that if necessary, because I'll check the legislation.
I certainly don't need a history on it, but just reinforces all the time of the importance of that industry to us.
Absolutely. You know, with both, I mean, with both our restaurant trades and the hotels, you know, you're talking about, you know, over almost $800,000 in offset.
Yeah.
The page 11 provides the local revenue sources, and again, I've already mentioned when we look at the Finance Department revenues showing that $90,000 decrease, it's a misnomer, because what we've done is to pull all the revenues that were reduced in the 13, 14, and 14, 15 year from that one revenue source on. That used to be called Interfund Computer Services, and that was deleted for those enterprise funds. I also wanted to reference the Recreation Department. Recreation programming and recreation revenues are revenue neutral. What we do when we put the recreation programs together is we estimate if those programs are run at 100%, what 100% of the revenue will be to cover those costs. So we're looking at about a $13,000 increase in revenue, but that it's only going to occur if we spend the entire budget on recreation. If we only operate 85% of the programs that are anticipated, then we'll spend less, we'll have less of an expenditure, but we'll also have less of a revenue source coming in from that. But at this point, based on the placeholder that we have for recreational programming, we would see about a $13,000 increase. Public services revenue, again, some of these revenues are difficult to post based on the reassignment of the dollars from the current year budget document. But what we're looking at there is that we're trying to isolate the dollars that are specifically public services, and some of those revenues have been collected in other departments in past years, so they're just estimates of what we're dealing with now. But overall, we're looking at a decline of about $61,000, but that's in conjunction with the $90,000 loss that we're expecting because of the interfund transfers not occurring. So we're not really seeing a negative as far as local program generated revenues, but it's pretty much on balance where we're not seeing an increase, we're not seeing a decrease. The last revenue component, and I've mentioned it already, is the use of fund balance, where I've recommended that you use $825,000. And on page 12, what we're looking at is what the undesignated fund balance will be. As Trish presented the other night in the presentation on the audit, what we're looking at is, as of June 30th, 2013, a fund balance of $10,163,758. And that's 13.7% of the general fund budget. The town council adopted a best practices provision based on what the appropriate level of an undesignated fund balance should be in the general fund. And that was to forecast up to a 16.67%. That 16.67% would allow for the on hand for about 2 months or 60 days of expenditures from the general fund. We're at 13.7. We're forecasting that even with the 825, with a $600,000 surplus for the current year, that we would stay at around the 9.9, right at the $10 million level. And we'd see somewhat of a decline in the percentage share, but still a very healthy fund balance at the, with use of the 825. If we'd kept that up at $1 million, it would have taken us down to below a 13% ratio, which I didn't feel was appropriate or necessary based on the way the budget was being prepared and what the urgency for was for trying to get less money coming out of fund balance before we get into a point where we're going back into the bond market, where we see concerns on that through Moody's on that type of an element. Again, our bond rating is a AA1. We have the highest bond rating in the state. Only 3 other communities have similar bond ratings like South Kingstown. So we are in good financial stead, and I think we can continue to use a portion of our fund balance toward the future year budget. Same thing that we'll be doing with the school fund, but I think that we have to be cognizant of what the general accepted accounting principles say as far as recognition of that type of income. Page 13 provides a graphic explanation of the undesignated fund balance, really on two stages. One, it shows from a dollar perspective where it's been at 9.9 million, down to about a low of 9.275, up to a high of about 10.2 million. Now, the solid line that's presented here shows it as a percentage of the following year's operating budget. So you can see that as a percentage of budget, we went up to a high of about 13.7, and we're forecasting that as of June 30th, 14, we'll be down at about 13.25%, 13.28 to be exact. Are there any questions so far on where we are? If not, I'd like to continue to move on. The general revenue expenditure statement, as I mentioned earlier, with a new chart of accounts, our effort is to provide detailed information and a more effective document for full cost presentation on key services. The chart on page M14 gives a breakdown of our expenditure statement and looks at the 5 functional areas of the operating program and the 4 areas that are outside of the operating program, which round out the general fund in total. We've got a breakdown of general administration, public safety, public services, parks and rec, libraries that make up the operations program. And I want to walk through that. The operating program for next year is forecast at $19.466 million. As said earlier, 3.15% or under $600,000 worth of an increase. Of that amount, $315,000 is an increase that's directly related to our employer share on municipal retirement. So half of what we're looking at for the increase in the entire general fund operations is tied to retirement cost share, particularly with the police retirement. In looking at general administration, what we're detailing on page M15 is all of the departments that make up general administration. I mentioned to you earlier that the town manager's office is showing a decrease, but the decrease that it's showing is because we've only got 85% of my salary listed there. The same holds true with the finance department. Finance department, a portion of her salary, of the finance director's salary, or 20% of it, goes to the utilities. 40% of some of 3 of her department members have also been cost shared across other departments. We've done that only with the enterprise funds, but not with the special revenue funds. Major increases that we're looking at next year, you can see that the major increase is in the canvassing authority. Why? Because in the current year there were no elections scheduled. In the 2014-15 year, there will be 2 elections. One will be the primary in September, and 2 will be the general elections in November. The State Board of Elections has also required that we maintain 10 polling places, which is going to require additional personnel. With that, we've budgeted for the full amount. The canvassing authority and many other canvassing authorities are questioning the necessity for the expansion in the number of polling places and the number of people that will need to be recruited to work at these elections. If, in fact, we have to meet the requirements presented by the State Board of Elections at this point, our overall budget increase would be $52,193 in that area. Some of our other department increases that we're seeing, most of those are directly tied to changes in benefits, particularly health care. So if we had somebody who was on individual health care that went to family health care, you're seeing differences there. Or conversely, if we had somebody who was on family health care that went to a buyback, we're seeing reductions. Because the benefits are now in the operating departments, it becomes much more evident as far as the flows. But I've given the council a detail on all of my personnel recommendations. You've got that, and it gives you all of the cost on each of the benefits by person, by percentage. So any questions on that, we can go at that at any time the council wishes. You know, departments that have been impacted based on healthcare changes. One is the planning department. It's down 11.5. It's because we had somebody at full that's now on a buyback. So we're not seeing the expense that's necessary there. Finance department, manager's office, we've talked about those. Canvassing, we've talked about that. Zoning, again, is a case of a increase that's directly associated with healthcare. Moving on to public safety departments, I think those are self-explanatory. We're looking at about a 3.6% increase in public safety programming, and that's also inclusive of the $298,000 increase within the police department. I will say that all of my municipal departments, we've been very strict in terms of what we put into the budget. We have reduced what our FICA requirements are down to its very limitations, where before we would forecast and not take into consideration potential for attrition. Same thing with healthcare. In the past, we've budgeted healthcare as a means of anticipating that we may have additional retirees that are going to cost additional dollars. We've cut that back. In fact, on healthcare, you'll see that we've cut back healthcare where we've had no percentage increase, and we're seeing about $186,000 reduction from what current year is on total expenditures associated with healthcare and dental. Again, this is another reason why I want to see the reduction in the undesignated fund balance, because the surpluses for the future will be considerably less than what we've anticipated in the past. You can't have it both ways. You can't cut back on your expenditures to provide better controls there and not anticipate that you're going to see the surplus position go down on an annual basis. So if that goes down, it's going to have impact on our bottom line for undesignated funds. Therefore, we need the undesignated funds to be reduced. M16, Public Works programs, that's up 1.8%. Those are the same programs that we've consistently dealt with, just like public safety. Recreation, same situation. Recreation, again, we're showing here $125,000 in expenditures. We're also showing about a 5.7% increase. Recreation holds the one place where I've recommended the council consider the expansion of the labor force by one person. That would be a technician, maintenance tech, and full cost would be approximately $52,000. That's part of that $125,000 increase that you see there. I provided explanation as far as that program when I think it's a little bit later in the presentation. Library, we're looking at about a 1.7% increase in costs. One of the other things that we've done for the libraries this year is that we've broken out the libraries into 3 subsets to allow the library to be able to keep whatever records they wish to keep, particularly with recreational supplies and books on a per library basis. So that we're rolling it up and showing you it like the library books are worth $94,000. But they're budgeting the books by Kingston, by Hale, by Peacedale, so that they've got better cost control as to where those dollars are being spent. The same thing with about $18,000 of recreational supplies. They've been able, with the new accounting system, to be able to bring in that chart of accounts those expenditures and to be able to manage those expenditures to have greater control over the way they spend dollars. And that's one of the things we're trying to do, is to have our departments more responsible for cost control. We can give them more data as to how they're spending money, why they're spending money, and with who they're spending money, and hopefully we can get a greater responsibility exercise in terms of trying to cut those costs as we go forward. Yes, Meg?
I'm just going to, if you don't mind, go back to the recreation program, because I see that there's an increase in administration, park maintenance, which we absolutely need, but I'm wondering why there is a decrease in athletic programs. Is it due to the fact that there's decline in school enrollments, or people are not? Because if you're increasing your administration and your maintenance and your aquatics, and I'm just wondering why athletics programs are showing a slight decrease, and it's only slight, so.
The reason that you're seeing it is based on what's being advanced as far as the programs that are in the athletics division. So when we talk about that, Terry will be able to go over exactly what those programs are. And those are adjusted on an annual basis. And it's based on, as you can see, there's increases in your leisure services program, but there's not so what we're doing is we're seeing that there's more program offerings being made in leisure than there is in athletics. And there's rationale for that. I'll let her explain that when we do that on, I think it's Wednesday night? Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on with the personnel program, I already mentioned that I'm proposing the 166.95 people to go to 167.95. That's that one position, and part of what Meg was just asking about with the maintenance division going up 96,000. Of that, 56,155 would be associated with the cost of that position. And again, this is a maintenance position that you get up to $56,000 once you look at the retirement cost, the healthcare costs, and the FICA cost. So this is what we're trying to present. So I don't want people to say, well, gee, you're offering a job at $35,000. It's not a $35,000 job because it costs you $56,000 to put that position in place. So that's why I think it's the budget presentation is much truer to providing the proper information for proper evaluation of what we're attempting to do. The next section deals just with providing a history as to what labor unions we work with. At this point, we're dealing with 4 different labor entities: IBPO for the police with the 52 sworn officers, 14 paramedics with the IAFF, Public Works, 34 members, actually 33 of 34 if that position is approved by the council, with 3 animal control and 8 dispatchers, and that's Council 94 asked for me. And the 4th is the Rhode Island NERI group, the NEA, for the 49 support service staff that are within municipal services. We also have about 43 non-organized people that are in the managerial or supervisory ranks, and that rounds out our 167 people within the public work, within the general fund program. What I wanted to do next is to take a look at what's the impact of the personnel program on the overall general fund. And what you can see is that the overall cost of the personnel program is $16.6 million. And when you look at that, you say, okay, well, $16.6 million, and if you go back to what your overall general fund operations program is, your operations program is $19.4 million. So of $19.4 million, you've got a total of $16.6 million that are associated with the personnel that run those programs. That's a significant portion of our budget. And when people say, where's the money going? It's going to be able to employ the people necessary to run those programs. Page 18 provides you with the detail as to where salary monies are going, or in any of the personnel subdivisions, whether it's full-time, part-time, longevity costs, overtime, and so forth. So you can see when we deal with hard money payments, what we're looking at is about $11.38 million, which is up $285,000 over the current year, or about 2.57%. The cost of benefits, we're looking at going from about a restated amount of $5,093,000 up to $5,222,000, or $129,000. So again, we're up $400,000 of the total $590,000 of the general fund is directly related to either employment benefits, salary, or other compensations. Any questions on that? I'll move on. Next section just provides detail as to how people in different labor groups are provided or afforded longevity payments. And as you can see, there's $335,000 in longevity payments, of which 142, almost 143 are for the munis, and the remainder, 190, the munis would be at 193, where the police alone would be at 143,000. On our retirement, for the 2014-15 year, we're looking at having a severance account within the police department of $100,000. When people leave the workforce after 25 years or so, many of them have significant accruals on sick leave and vacation. Vacation can be up to 30 days. The payments on those, if we had more than 3 officers go out, would exceed the $100,000. Any money that isn't expended within the 100 is then transferred over to the compensated absences reserve fund. I've posted here what the asset to liability statement is for compensated absences, and we're now looking at compensated absence liability. What's that mean? It means if everybody were to leave on June 30th of 2013, we closed down government, all 167 people left. What they would be entitled to collect is $2 million. What do we have booked and available to pay for that if that were to occur? We've got $1.568 million. So the deficit or the unfunded liability is $436,000. When we looked at this originally, we had talked about having approximately 50% target of assets to liability. You can see that we've certainly exceeded that. And what we're looking to do is to be able to maintain that type of a balance. What that means is that when people are accruing vacation or sick leave in the year in which it's accrued, we're putting the money aside for that when we have to pay it out. Since the money's invested, if it's paid out at a higher rate, the investment earnings will help pay down what that cost differential would be. So this makes good sense. Many municipalities are going on a pay-as-you-go basis, and they will pay out based on what they need to pay out, but will not hold any assets in reserve. This is also something that is reviewed through the audit and something that rating agencies are very interested in. This is in addition to OPEB. This is in addition to unfunded liability with pensions. But for South Kingstown's purposes, we've maintained all 3 of those liabilities and have good reserve balances set aside for them.
That's actual money, it's not IOUs.
That's actual, that $1,568,000 is actually invested funds that we have at this point. So we have a very limited unfunded liability associated with that. Moving on to M20, the healthcare. Healthcare, I provide you with a chart that shows that no less than 17.5% is the copay requirement. We have seen, as we've increased copay requirements, a greater effort for people to go to a buyback on benefits, and that has been helpful in terms of us being able to reduce our overall annual costs associated with health care. As noted in the last paragraph before we get to the retirement system, you can see that at this point between the town and the school, we have a fund balance of about $6.6 million in unrestricted fund balance for the healthcare reserve fund. 2.3 million is town funds and 4.2 is school funds. I have recommended, and the school committee has agreed to have $1 million of their assets turned over to the OPEB to be able to provide greater funding availability within that trust fund. We'll talk about that in a moment. With health care, we've moved up into the operating departments each of the actual costs, so that the health care for all police department employees is in the police department and so forth. But what we also have is 2 additional costs. Those costs would be for OPEB. OPEB is post-employment benefits, other post-employment benefits. When we look at OPEB, OPEB really is paid for in 2 components. It's known as an annual required contribution that's made up of what your direct cost is for paying for the cost of those people that are already retired and receiving health care. But it's also made up of a second part, and that second part is the value of accrued benefits that people are accruing during the year. So what does that mean? It means that if somebody's here for another year, they're going to receive health care in retirement. We have to put the money aside for that. So in addition to what we pay next year, which is forecast at $476,000, we need an additional $325,000 that would provide the full payment on the annual required contribution. And we're projecting that at $826, that annual contribution. So what we're doing is we're budgeting $325,000 that we can have OPEB meet its OC. And we're also budgeting $100,000 in the healthcare reserve so that if we end up with unanticipated expenses or catastrophic medical expenses that have not been anticipated, or if we see retirements in our ranks where people are able to keep health care in retirement and we have to hire replacement personnel that are also going to take health care, we have to have that $100,000 reserve. So you've got a total of $425,000 in health care benefits that are not directly assigned to an operating department. Okay, if there's no questions on that, I'll move into the retirement system. I don't want to get into a long discussion on what the General Assembly and the affected groups of the retirement plan are doing at this point because it doesn't affect the 14-15 year. It will affect the 15-16 year. So if in fact the settlement agreement that's been reached by the parties to that litigation, if they're met, it's going to have an impact on South Kingstown. One is that the proposed settlement agreement would add about $232 million in unfunded liability to the state plans. There's 8 different plans. Of that, what's associated with South Kingstown is probably about $2.2 million in increased liability. And what we're also looking at is that the employer contributions for the 15-16 year would probably go up by another 6 to 8% unless there was a re-amortization of the unfunded liability associated with those pension plans. So at this point, there's a great deal of uncertainty. But the certainty that is there is that it doesn't affect 14-15. So I want to stay away from that in the budget discussions and rather deal with what's the implications of just the 14-15 year. And I think it's important for the council to realize what the retirement contributions are going up to. In the 14 year, the police was at 15.02% of their salary and longevity. It's now going to climb to 22.79%. You know, when you say it's a 7.77% change, it doesn't sound like much. When you say 7.7% as a percentage of 15%, it's over 50% worth of an increase. EMS is going up 1.8%, up to 5.96%, and the munis will go up 0.82%. And I've already accounted for the value of the pensions in each of the operating accounts. I did want the council to be aware of what the funded ratio is on our retirement plans, because a great deal has been said about municipalities that have underfunded retirement plans, both private, number of them with private plans. We have 3 individual employee group retirement plans. Those 3 groups are managed through the state of Rhode Island employers retirement system. The police have assets of $20.4 million as of June 30th, 2013, and they have liabilities of 26.9. So they are at 75.9% funded. So that's below, it's pierced the 80% threshold that we would like to see all pension plans stay above. That's why we're seeing such a major increase in the retirement rate contribution for the 15 year. EMS is got $2.9 million in assets and only $2.5 million in liabilities. So it's got a 118% funded ratio. The municipal system, 46.7 versus 52.8%, 52.8 million in liabilities. So overall, we have assets of about $70 million set aside for our retirement systems, $82.2 million in liabilities, or about $12 million in unfunded. So right now, our funded ratio is 85.3% collectively for those three funds. The town's share on teacher retirement is not shown here because we do not have an individual retirement plan for teachers. The teachers participate statewide in one teacher's retirement plan that the state shows where the liabilities are. They would be considerable for our teachers, but they're out of the state plan rather than being individual retirement plans owned and managed through the retirement system on behalf of South Kingstown. So at this point, we're at 85.3%. That's down from the current year, the prior year of 86.3%. So we're continuing to see an erosion on the spread between assets and liabilities, but a lot of this is based on what the investment income is that's being generated through the retirement system and the actuarial assumptions that are used to determine what future liability would be. I think that we're still in very good shape in terms of our ratio above the 80% rate. Would I like to see it back over 100 where it was 5 years ago? Yes. But if the actuarial assumptions that were being used several years ago were inaccurate, then we really didn't have the 100% that they were reporting at that time. I think that the report on asset to liability through the retirement system today is much closer to what is real, based on more realistic actuarial assumptions being used and more realistic estimates as to what the value of investment earnings will be over the long term. Yes.
Can I just ask you on the teacher's retirement, so they don't break it down into town by town when it comes to their...
No, they don't.
So it's just considered one big state
That's right.
retirement pension?
But the employer contribution is shared on a 60-40 basis with the state. So 40% of the full cost on the employer's full cost is paid through the state, and the municipality pays the other 60% of what that liability is.
So wouldn't there be a place that you could see that, whether the municipality has been keeping up with their 60% or not?
The municipalities have to keep up with it because we've always paid, both the town and the school in the state retirement system, we've always paid exactly what was required. So you can get an asset to liability statement for the teacher's retirement fund, but it's no different whether it's from Coventry or whether it's from Narragansett or whether it's from South Kingstown as far as the share ratio as to what's unfunded and what's funded.
But certain towns aren't keeping up with their
No.
share.
Every town that's in the state retirement system is required to pay the contribution rate. The people that haven't kept up are those that have private pension plans where there's not a requirement. Under state law, if you do not pay what your requirement is for pension, they withhold state funds. So if they're going to give us $185,000 and we haven't paid the $185,000, they'll hold that money back. And they'll transfer, instead of giving it to the town, they'll transfer it directly to the retirement system.
I see.
So no, the reason there's unfunded liability with the teachers, similar to what it is with our municipal groups, is because of the change in the actuarial assumptions that are being used. When I talk about actuarial assumptions, I'm talking about the change in what they expect to be the average retirement age, or the number of years that somebody is actually going to collect in retirement, or the amount of money that investment earnings are going to generate on a yearly basis. When those are changed, they're going to change what the bottom line is as far as the amount of liability that's outstanding. And so what's taken place over the last several years has been hiring consultants, actuarials that have done a much better job of providing a more conservative approach to what the exposure is. And when they do that, it broadens the unfunded liability dollar amount that's there. And when that gets broadened, what's required is to increase the percentage of the employer's contribution. Unfortunately, in Rhode Island, there is statutorily a requirement for the employer contribution, which is set in state statute. So if that says that the employee contribution is 8%, if the actuarial report that comes back says you need an increase of 5% over what it was this year, you're not increasing the employee share, you're only increasing the employer share. So that's why we've seen large increases. Some of the changes that are being projected with the settlement agreement, if that's passed, would increase some of the employee contributions as a means of reducing overall exposure for the employer share. But they may be going up 1%, where potentially there may be several point increases necessary to meet what the target is. Because when you look at unfunded liability, what you do is you look at the number of years that you're willing to say, over that term, I'm going to pay that money back. So if you look at it and you say, well, let's say 5 years ago you had a 30-year plan, you should be able to pay off all your liability then in the next 25 years. Well, if you take that amount and then you divide it by 30 again, so you start from year one, what you're doing is you're paying more in the long run because you haven't caught up with what you said you were going to do 5 years before or 10 years before. And that's where the problems have been with these retirement systems. That and the fact that in good economic times, there was a number of benefit enhancements that were provided where there was really no cost accounting done as to what that new exposure was going to mean in terms of increased costs and who was going to pay that increased cost. But that gets us off into a whole other, I can spend 3 hours on that, but I don't think we need to.
Steve, before you go on, just while we're on M21, just middle graph there, like police, 22.79%. What are the individual employees' contributions of those three, police, EMS, and municipal?
The employer contributions, I think it's 8% with, I think it's 8% with the municipal, and it's either 7 or 8%. You might have to check that, because when they had a 20-year plan, this has changed since that 2011 legislation. Let me get the number for you.
It's actually in here. You can, it's in here.
It is it? I must have skipped that page.
There was a staggered rate, I know, with the police. No, there was a staggered rate with the police.
The employee is 7% for the muni,
All right, 7% from you.
7% for the employee, and then the employee for the police and for EMS would be 8. But that was because they were on 20-year retirement plans, so I'm not sure if there was an adjustment made with that in 2011. Jim, I'd have to take a look
That's
at
okay.
it.
In currently, in our current year, the teachers are 9.5%, and what's the town, do you know?
I'll get the detail. I just don't, I don't have it
All right, well, that's
off the
fine.
top of my
Yeah,
head
I
at this
didn't mean to
point.
take you astray, okay.
I do have it, but I got it back in the other office.
Oh, that, no, oh, gosh,
Uh,
fine.
All right, if we are done with that, we can move on to page, the bottom of 21 and 22, miscellaneous services. These are the support services, anywhere from the town hall to municipal insurance, to unemployment, workers' comp. These are services that really don't go to one specific department, but are required. Unemployment insurance is not a municipal benefit. It is a municipal statutory requirement to be provided, and with good cause. But it is not something that is for the employee, it's for the employer, for protection of the employee if they are hurt, injured, or disabled as a result of a workplace accident. The Town health care, I've already talked about that for the $350,000 for the OPEB and the $100,000. The fund contingency is what we've always set aside at the $65,000. And the town hall operation is about $182,000. In addition to municipal services, we then have the transfers to the senior services program, and we'll talk about that tomorrow night with Terry, and the school transfer. The school transfer is going to be $500,000 less in property tax than was requested by the school committee. What I've recommended to the superintendent, and she has taken as a recommendation to the school committee, is to amend the school committee's initial budget request whereby $165,000 would be increased in the contribution from designated fund balance. So we'll take it up to $400,000 from the $335,000 that had been proposed by the schools. I think the easiest way to look at it is if you jump to the bottom of page 23. Bottom of page 23 shows the revenue statement that I'm proposing for the school fund. You can see I've agreed with them as far as the state aid and group home aid for the $7.8 million. And again, they're losing $313,000 as a part of the formula reductions that are anticipated. So you lose $313,000. They also had $535,000 from net assets to balance, from the fund balance, and they had recommended that be decreased to $235,000. What I had suggested to them is that that number was too low. It didn't need to be that low, and that what they could do is to take 1/3 of the amount that was going to be available. So at the top of page M23, there was a fund balance of $3,176,000 as of June 30th of 13. The town administration, with the approval of the council, agreed that they would use $350,000 to pay for the financial management software that they were going to be using. They had $195,000 in encumbrances at the close of the year, and they were using $535,000, and we also agreed that they would use $903,000 of that fund balance to pay down capital costs so that we didn't have to bond capital improvements for the schools in the 14-15 year. That meant that it drew down the fund balance to $1,192,000. 1/3 of that amount is $397,597. So I said to them, you need to bring that use of undesignated funds up to the $400,000 level as a way of minimizing the amount of property taxes that would be necessary to go into the program. So it was an increase from $235,000 that had been recommended by the school committee up to $400,000, or $165,000 increase there. In addition, in reviewing the school department's expenditure statement, we believed that the amount that was budgeted for health care was about $335,000 more than necessary to support that program, plus the fact that they have almost $4 million in fund balance in the healthcare reserve meant that even if they were going to be spending up to that last dollar, they had reserve funds available to be able to pay that. So I recommended, and they agreed to, a reduction of $335,000 in the expense statement. So the revenue statement's going up $165,000, expenditures are going down $335,000, so you have a net of $500,000 less in property tax need. So when we get done with them, they're ending up with a $482,000 increase in tax appropriation, or 1%. And this is down from the 2% that they were using in the pro forma back in December when we last met with them on forecasting for the 14-15 year. With that, you've got the revenue statement at the bottom of 23, and you've got the expense statement on the top of 24. The other components of the budget are the contributions to outside agencies, and that's the 12 human service agencies that receive funding from the town and 10 civic organizations that receive funding from the town. So there's a total of $190,000 between those 22 organizations that the council in the past has provided financial supports for. I have maintained those at level funding. If the council believes there's a necessity to make adjustments in the rate of contributions to those agencies, it certainly would be a policy decision and an adjustment to the town program. The final two elements, the capital budget, which I don't think needs any description since you've already adopted a capital program, and debt service, again, that's been gone over in detail in the development of the capital budget. We are seeing major decreases in school debt of 378 and on municipal debt of 19,000. So you've got you've got a net decrease from a tax perspective of about 5 cents. And Tricia's just given me the employee contributions, and I can't read your writing. Why don't you go through it for them?
Gosh, they're only numbers.
I'll turn the mic on.
Great. The employee contribution for the police officers is 8%, EMS is 8%, municipal is 7%, the teachers are 8.75%, and admin is 7%.
Thank you.
All right, so we've done the debt service. I think I'm done with the, the message. Is there any questions on the message before we go on?
Yeah, Steve, just M24, I'm sorry, you went over the expense statement there of the schools, M24, top graph. Equipment, can you help me out with that 688,032 increase?
Most of that, Jim, is in computer equipment. And if you recall, when we met with the school committee on the capital budget, they talked about two specific program initiatives that they had underway that they were looking for funding on. One was to provide either laptops or to all of the incoming freshman class. And the second was to provide sufficient computers and workstations that would be available for the conduct of the standard testing that's going to be required. And I believe that the cost on that was, it was well over $800,000.
900,000, I thought.
$900,000 that's in there. The net cost increase is about $688, but yes, there is substantial equipment in terms of hardware that is being proposed in that budget. Again, from an administrative standpoint, we review the school budget not for program, but from an accountability standpoint on are the numbers that they're presenting to us on the program that they're proposing accurate to what we think is necessary to run the program. It's really a policy decision, and I'm not going to get involved with as to whether or not there's a necessity for that type of equipment acquisition. But I think that that is something that should be discussed at length with the school committee at the time that they meet with the council on the 12th to review that budget document.
But that money is directed for that equipment. It can't be used for other purposes.
School money can be used for any purpose, Jim.
No, I know.
But I think that what we have attempted to do, and we've been very successful at doing, is having the schools stay within the budgeted amounts and with the programs that they've listed. I don't think that they're budgeting things that then they're doing something else with it. We haven't seen that in the past, but from a legal standpoint, the school budget, once the money is appropriated for their purposes, they can expend it as they wish. However, for us to develop the sense of trust that we have with the school committee and the transfer of tax dollars based on that trust, if we were seeing that monies were not being expended as presented in the budget document, I think that we would be a little bit more cautious in the amount of money that we would be putting forward for future years.
I think it's important for the public to realize that not only the capital budget, 900,000 plus we have this almost $700,000. I mean, we are certainly making the schools as healthy and as advanced technology-wise as we can. True, not true? I mean,
No,
this is-
I agree with you, and, you know,
Right.
again, we have never reviewed their budget and suggested revisions on the program. We've noted that there's different programmatic items that are atypical. I think the major thing we would like to determine this year is that if we are agreeing that those items are something that from a school committee perspective are necessary for next year, that we make sure that it's a one-year
One-year deal.
expenditure and that it's not considered part of the base. Because we've got those type of things that really have to be reviewed on a yearly basis. Any other questions? If not, what I would suggest you do is to turn to the narrative on page N1, and you can also deal with the expenditure statement, which starts on GF1. If you're using the ring binders, what I'd suggest you do is you take your GF1 section out of the ring binder and follow along with the narrative on N1. That would be the easiest way of doing it if you want to, but that's just me. If we start out, and I'm going to walk through these relatively quick. I'm not going to call for the departments up. If council has questions, the department directors will address from the podium. How I would like to conduct the work sessions from this point forward is that if there is a question where someone is interested in the council considering an adjustment, modification, change to anything that's in the town manager's proposed budget, tell me what that is now, and what we will do is we will give you a list at a later time. So if you say to me, gee, I'd like to change the town council's account by adding money to it, tell me what it is that you want future consideration of. Then what we'll do is on the date that we're going to have budget adoption, we'll have those X number of questions on a sheet of paper so that you'll know exactly what's still open for discussion, and everybody else on the council will, and you can decide on how you want to proceed on those items. That way it'll be a little bit more orderly. We've done it that way for the last several years, and it seems to work to everybody's advantage to try to, that's not going to limit you. If there's still other things that come up subsequent to us going through them tonight, nothing limits you from asking to have that list added to, or if you don't want to bring it up until you get to the actual meeting. But for our purposes, it would be easier if we could keep an inventory of what it is that's open questions so that we don't forget about them. Dale will, be the keeper on the question, and then when we put the agenda together, we'll give you that information item. So, having said that, if we start town council account, what you're going to see in a lot of cases with the restated budget versus the adopted budget is where benefit changes have occurred. So we never budgeted for FICA on the adopted budget, but the FICA cost on part-time salaries is going to be $1,033. So that's going to be added to your budget. And the part-time salaries are inclusive of the town council, and they're inclusive of the great work that's done by our cameraman on all of the council members. So if you want to cut Billy Forbes out of the budget, that's the line item to do it.
Do you want to raise? I would like to pose the question that we talked before in prior years with the budget, in reference to an increase in the town council salaries. And I know that you had talked about doing some kind of analysis with other towns. So I don't know if you have that, Steve, for this town council to look at, and how many years has the salary been the same for the town council?
I can't tell you how long it's been the same for the town council. I can give you the report that was prepared by the state on town council salaries, and I'll have that available for you tomorrow night. That's published with the Department of Administration to Municipal Center. So I'll download that tomorrow and give you a copy of it.
And I think with that information, at some point, I may make a recommendation to increase the town council salaries.
All right, I would suggest one caveat is that you would have to do it effective with the start of the new council term, because you can't legally increase the salaries for the existing term. So if what you're looking at is an increase, do you want, I'll get you the information and we'll just have that as an open item at this point. Okay.
Yeah, and if I may, I've also been on that for years too. You know, I know we can't have expense accounts, but I find with the size of our town and what information I've gotten from other towns and communities, this is an incredible deal for our taxpayers of what we're being paid up here for the amount of work we put in.
I'll give you the
I have to
detail.
tell you that. I've got to tell you that outright. It is, so we are very cheap labor up here. Really. So I'm very happy with the new council. I'm happy to give some more. Maybe get some new people to run for office. I don't know, but a few of those dinners we had when we heard what they're being paid at Block Island and some of these other cities and towns, this is crazy that we're being paid so little. So I'd like to think I'm worth more than $5, $6 an hour. Maybe not.
About what it is,
Maybe not.
if that.
If that.
I will give you the information and you tell me what you want and we'll amend the budget.
Okay, so it's okay.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no further questions on Billy's salary, see, Billy, nobody jumped to give you any increase.
We don't know what his salary is.
We'll take care of you.
On the budget referendum, that is, if the budget were to go to a referendum, what would it cost? It would cost about $10,072. Dale reduced some of the estimates as far as the cost of overtime, which would then adjust FICA. But we're looking at about that $10,000. If there's no question, the third item is the legal staff. On page N2, I provide you with the detail as to how that $174,460 would be, why is it necessary? And it shows you what the estimate is for the solicitor, special legal counsel, the criminal prosecution, as well as outside legal services. What we're looking at is approximately 178 to really $175 to $180 an hour for the time that's spent between legal for general municipal services and planning and zoning, and approximately $93 an hour associated with costs for prosecution for the police department. So overall, we're looking at about 1,100 hours and a cost of around $150 per hour average with the several attorneys that we have working with us at this time. If there's no questions, I would...
I just have a question. I'm reading at the top of page N2, and these amounts for legal does not include litigation in state supreme or superior courts or federal courts, including appellate representation.
That's correct.
So all of that is extra cost above and beyond this?
That's would be the dollars would be coming out of the other legal expenses there that are listed for the $4,000.
$4,000 for court appearances?
That's all we've ever budgeted for.
And is that usually all you ever spend? Okay.
All right. Moving on, the probate judge is budgeted at the same amount that it's been for the last several years, which is at $4,000. It's adjusted because as a part-time salary, there's a Social Security requirement, which is worth $306. So the budgeted amount for the 14-15 year is up to $4,306.
As to the probate court, I would like to increase the probate court judge's salary. I think it's been I don't know how long the salary's been at $4,000.
We'll get that information for you, just like with the council.
Yes, these are probate court judge salaries throughout the state for the year 2012. And I'd just like to give it to the other members. I think that
Holy moly.
$4,000 is very low. It's certainly not even commensurate with what legal counsel is receiving or the police prosecutor. Not that I'm suggesting that the probate court should be that high. I'm not. It is an appointed position that is, it's a good public service that many people, many lawyers will take on, but $4,000, I believe the probate court judge puts in approximately 10 hours a month, and with my numbers, that comes to about $33.33 per hour, which it's not many lawyers you're going to get to work for that amount. I just think out of respect for the position and the job that's done in South Kingstown, that it should be increased. And I'm noticing here we had 153 estates were open this year, and we are a population of over 30,000. And I'm looking at some of the other towns that have populations that are less than ours, and their probate court judges are receiving substantially more. And when I refer to that, I'm looking at Narragansett, which is $6,000 for their probate court judge, and their population is approximately 15,900 people. And then I go on to Newport, which is $12,756 a year, and they have 25,000 people. And it goes on and on. So I just think we're very much outdated in the amount of money that we put towards our probate court judge, and I'd like to see that increased.
Actually, Carol, it was 153, not 133, so.
No, I thought I said 153, didn't I? Maybe I said 133, but 153 is how many estates were open this year. And I think the estates have become rather complex in this town. Browning Estate, the Mary Carpenter Estate. So with that, I'd like to see an increase.
I would like to just add the question, when was the last increase for this probate judge? If we can get that, yeah, I don't need the answer now.
I'll take a look and see if we can find it. I know that it went from, I think it went from 3 to 4, but it's got to go back probably 10 or 15 years. The last time that was changed, but I just don't remember the years. They just fly by.
I certainly concur with Carol on that. Even if it were 8 or 9 hours of work per month, $40, $50 rate for an excellent attorney is, again, not a proper measure it.
I'd like to look at, to be personally honest with you, towns that are similar in size or have randomly same number of cases that they've looked at. And let's just compare apples to apples with those towns, because I think that would give us a good starting place to determine whether or not we really need to increase it. But when I look at similar towns, or abutting towns, if you will, we may have to, Carol, I think Carol might be right on the fact that we may have to look at this and make an adjustment.
I mean, I'm looking at Coventry, that's a similar size, $9,800 a year. Then you go to West Warwick, $20,000 a year. They have 29,200 residents. It's all over the park when you look at what the different probate court judges earn. But I'd like to see an increase. Now, as far as how much, is that something we do tonight, or should we discuss that at the work session at the end?
I think it just depends on what you're comfortable with. If you want, I mean, it would make it a lot easier if we knew what the range was that people were looking at as far as your questions, so that you're comfortable with it. But, you know, whether you do it tonight or whether you do it anytime before the budget adoption, that's up to you.
Well, I'd like to see it doubled. I think 8,000 is fair with the amount of work that's put in. And also, I think you have to understand that the probate court judge doesn't get any extra, like, they use their own staff, typing, telephone calls, all that is their own, if outside of what's happening in the clerk's office. But I mean, if he's writing a decision or taking a phone call from an attorney, that's done on his own, with his own time and staff. Is that correct? Or, like, if he has to write a decision, he types that, right, Dale?
I would ask the attorney to write, you know, or based on what you tell him to do, or I have some proposals.
Well, that's it.
All right,
That's
well,
what I-
we've got it noted down, and we'll carry that forward.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Town Manager's Office is down to $22,000, as I mentioned earlier, because of the change in the personnel salary detail. That and the benefits were reduced on that 15% on my salary. If there's no questions, the first one, they don't want to increase.
First time we haven't had an increase.
Personnel Administration, Personnel Administration, we're looking at about a $9,500 increase. Most of that's tied up, as you can see, there's about $7,600 change in the value of the cost of health care, where we went from a single to a family on that coverage. If there's no questions, we'll go to the Town Clerk's office. Town Clerk, we're looking at about a $10,200 increase. And of that, most of it is based on the 2% salary adjustment that's budgeted in the, with the labor contract for next year. We're looking at a total of $406,000. You can see the differences here, just, you know, when you look at a budgeted amount of $273 and the restated budget at $396, I think it'll give the public a much better idea as to what each of these departments are actually costing to operate. I also think that, you know, I'm not spending any time on the narrative, but the narrative, I think, provides a more complete picture as to what each of the departments are doing, also what their goals are. And, you know, I think that just picking out one of Dale's goals as far as next year is investigating on behalf of the council, getting rid of paper and getting into laptops for you. And I guess we'll need to know in the future what type of reaction that gets from the council. But we're looking at exploring those opportunities for us to try to save a few more trees, and also so that from a, you'll be able to have the records available and you'll be able to search back, rather than having, you know, file cabinets full of the documents going back for the years that you served on the council. The public information really is two components.
Steve, could I just ask for the town council's input on that? You know, my own 2 cents worth, switching over to laptops versus all of this paper. If there is definitely some kind of a program where the town council can read and then add additional notes. I mean, when I read through my town council packet, I mock it all up and make notes. I know that that's not conducive to the iPad that I have when I read through the town council. I read it on my iPad, and then I still have to keep all of my notes on a separate piece of paper. So my 2 cents worth, if there was some kind of a program where town council could read it and then add their notes, you know, quickly on a wireless keyboard or something, I think that would be valuable. I don't know how the rest of the town council feels, but I think at some point they need to express their concerns. You interested?
I agree. I mean, we're all underlining and putting stars everywhere, right?
Arrows.
And I bought a very large file cabinet for my house since I've been here, and it's full already.
And you'd have to have a teaching program, I would imagine.
So
We
is
will
this
do
town
that.
council
I think
in
what-
favor of
What
going
we will
paperless
do
or no?
is, what we want to
think it
do
would
is to look at some of
streamline
the software that's available out there for this type of a purpose. Then be able to demonstrate that to see what type of reaction that there is. Because we're not buying equipment unless we know that it can be used. But I think what we're looking at here is just to explore that possibility, to try to get away from as much paper. And it's very labor-intensive on our part to
Sure.
be able to get the paper out. Not just from a copy machine perspective, but from a labor, the amount of hours that it takes to get that stuff prepared.
I know in talking to Councilman Paul Donnelly, you know, he reads all of his stuff online. You know, I've been converting to that too. I've really been a secure paper person, but I've let go and, you know, done more reading online. But, so, and we've had this, you know, part of our budget discussion for a couple of years, and there never really has been any town council action stepping forward one way or the other. So I really would encourage town council members to voice their, you know, what they would like to see happen here. Thank you.
Okay, on the public information, there's two components. One is the $9,900 that we pay on an annual basis with Everbridge, which is our emergency notification system and Smart GIS. And the second is the web administration for the town's website. So we're looking at about $14,180 to maintain the program at current level. If you recall, when we purchased Everbridge, we had a guaranteed price with no increases for, I think it was a 5-year period. Canvassing authority, again, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at a $52,000 increase. A major portion of this increase is the change that's necessary as far as the seasonal salaries, where we're looking at $38,750. And that's for the conduct of the elections itself. We're also looking at miscellaneous expenses, which could be termed pizza, but there's not much food there for the number of people that we're feeding that's there. The other costs that are there are, actually, it's gotten better than pizza. I'll agree with you. You've gone to box lunches that,
What does Dale need? I mean, I know how difficult it's been sometimes to get fully staffed, but more money needed?
What the Board of Elections is recommending, they're recommending that I go from 64 workers that I had in 2012 to 107 poll workers.
Whoa.
Jeez. Why?
Money is one issue, recruitment is another. So, there's, I think there's going to be further discussions about this as we get closer and closer to the election with the other council authorities and the Board of Elections. But, at this point in time, that's, what they're recommending or what they're, not recommending, what they're mandating.
So it's more of a mandate than a recommendation.
What were those numbers again, Dale?
In 2012, election season, we had 10 polling locations. As you know, we went from 12 to 10.
Right.
Increased the district. We had 60 poll workers, and they're recommending that I go up to 107.
Wow.
Poll workers, which is significant.
And why are they recommending that?
Because they, of the lines that were at the last election, and, I think that we need to have more, maybe another set of supervisors, but in some of my locations, they are recommending that I have 5 sets of supervisors. 5 sets, that's 10 supervisors plus a moderator and a clerk.
But even a non-presidential year, they want you to have the exact same, it doesn't matter, it doesn't make a difference.
And in this election, there's going to be the voter ID you have to show, right?
There was at the last, however, you know, there will be a picture ID, it will be either have some sort of government ID. At the last election, they allowed other forms of identification. But yes, however, there was a bill introduced today to eliminate that.
Oh. Because that would seem to make it a longer wait, maybe.
You know something, I have to tell you something. I was out at the polling places during the election, and and actually, I thought it helped the time, it go along. Because
Oh.
somebody hands you your ID, you know how to spell your name, look it up quickly, so your name, your address, you know, you got it right on the ID there. So,
Good point.
I thought it kind of enhanced the whole process, but, you know,
Yeah, good to know. And then they have if you don't have an ID, you get to file a provisional ballot, yeah.
But the only way a provisional ballot would count, as we discussed the other day, it wouldn't count unless it was close to the margins, and then your provisional ballot would kick in. Is that correct? Didn't we talked about that?
One of the candidates was talking about that.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day at a meeting.
Actually, I certainly don't remember any press on any problems at polls in the Rhode Island election. I know nationally, some of the larger cities had a lot of long lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right,
Right.
yeah. But the courts were good about letting them, the polls stay open to accommodate those folks who did show up, so, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Boy, that's a big mandate,
Yeah.
moderators.
And so your numbers that you have for the canvassing authority include the 107 poll workers?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, great.
I've learned not to deny her requests.
No,
I would hope
I
that's the
wouldn't.
case.
Other departments that I don't deny requests, Finance Department, the request is down $35,000, but again, we've reallocated 4 different positions there, one by 20%, and 3 others that are at a 40% share ratio for next year. And again, this takes away us having to do reimbursements. So there's really no other changes in those that department for the year. There is a lot of good detail in terms of the amounts of activities that the finance department's involved with, as well as dealing with the collection agency and the collection ratios. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the information technology. Information technology now has 2 full-time people. This goes back, we've always had 2 budgeted, but we've only been carrying 1 full-time for the last couple of years. We have hired now a information technology director. She's doing a very good job for us, and with the implementation of the new software systems and the equipment. Council approved the other night bringing the email in-house and being able to get us to being able to do scheduling through the computer systems itself. We're also looking at the next year with being able to come online with permit and licenses, and also to continue to be able to get brand-new tax bills. I want to make sure that it's said often that what we're looking at with tax bills is going to be a change this year. Tax bills this year will be separating the automobile tax from the real estate tax. So if you have an automobile and you have real estate, you're going to get separate bills. This is the way most municipalities have developed their billing systems at this point. With Vision, which is the company that we'll be using that services most municipalities in Rhode Island, that type of system has been in place for several years. Persons with multiple pieces of real estate will receive separate bills as well, which is also a different practice from what we have done in the past. What that will do is it'll provide greater flexibility for the taxpayer in terms of being able to pay taxes on specific pieces rather than having payments made on a global basis, with them trying to assign dollars, or if there's penalties, how they're assigning the penalties. So we think that it will provide greater accountability, not just for the town administration, but for the taxpayer. It will mean that people will get multiple bills, where in the past they had a single bill. Some people will like that, some people will not. But I think it's probably the best billing system that we can come up with based on the systems that we've reviewed.
So Steve, if you have more than one vehicle, you're going to get two separate bills even
No,
on
you'll
the-
have the vehicles will be on the same bill, but they won't be on the same bill as the real estate.
Okay.
The post-audit, we're looking at a $24,483 cost next year. When we talk about the post-audit, I'll be looking to Trish to give us a recommendation on whether to extend the existing contract with the existing vendor that we're using, or whether we'll go out for formal bids for a new contract. And we'll be looking at that within the next couple of months, I guess. I would probably assume that we're looking more at an extension of the contract, since with the new accounting system, we've worked with them for the last year with its implementation. But I want to give that more consideration before we give a recommendation to the council on that. The assessor's office, as usual, Gene's doing a crack job on your behalf. The changes are associated with the 2% salary increase that are required within the labor contract, and some adjustments made in terms of medical insurance for active employees, changes from a person that was doing buyback to a person now with a full health care plan. So that's where we're seeing that $26,000 increase. We're recommending a reduction in the funding level for the Assessment Board of Review. Since last year was a reval year, we had more money budgeted to accommodate the number of appeals that would occur. We're not expecting that many appeals next year, so the number of meetings at $20 a meeting, we're estimating no more than $500 in stipends. And you'll see there's no FICA here, because these are stipends that are being paid rather than them being recognized as part-time employees. In the current year, they were recognized as a part-time salary. It was misclassified. When we're paying somebody on a stipend basis, we're not responsible. They're a third-party vendor, so we're not responsible to pay the 7.65% on FICA on their behalf. So what Trish has done on each of those different separations determined whether people are actually part-time personnel, seasonal personnel, or whether they are with stipends for boards and commissions. And this makes for adjustments within the budget document. As you can see, you had $1,800 budgeted on the restated budget, and that's going to go down to zero, but with the stipend is going to stay in a new line item for the 2014-15 year. The planning department, we are recommending the reduction in part-time salaries, where we had a retirement occur with a part-time secretarial assistant in the planning department. I'm not recommending that we replace that part-time assistance at this time. That's not to say that we may not come back for that at a later year. I would also mention that I've made an adjustment with the planning associate within that department, and provided an adjustment on her salary. So we've increased the full-time salaries, but have also reduced the part-time salaries. The overall net effect is a $11,000 change. This is another department that saw about $23,000 in adjustments on health care based on people going to a buyback situation rather than paying their co-shares that would be associated with the health care plan. Buyback's only $2,000 a year that they get as a direct payment, rather than us paying on a family plan upwards to $15,000. The planning board, really no change there. Again, changing over from a part-time salary to a stipend, where they'll get a 1099 at the end of the year rather than a W-2, and also adjusting back that FICA requirement. On the graphical information or the GIS system, really no change there to speak of. The change is the 2% salary increase and a reduction in professional services, because we fund that once every 2 years. The moving on with Conservation Commission. Conservation Commission sent the council a letter earlier this year asking not to assign the dollar amounts of that $850. If you recall, they were providing money to the Watershed Council. They were providing different monies. They have contacted each of the agencies and indicated that they're not assigning a specific value, and that they'll work with those agencies. I think a portion of the $850 they want to keep to be used for education purposes. Right now, with land conferences, in fact, I've got 2 members of the Conservation Commission that'll be attending the statewide land conservation council meeting up at URI at about $50 a person. What they want to do is to have that come out of conservation funds next year. So I have not assigned any dollar values, and we're just showing it as a miscellaneous transfer that's available for their use. Obviously, when we say for their use, they'll have to submit a budget to me documenting how those dollars would be expended. Zoning and building inspection, really no changes there. It's salary increases that are based on at least one of the employees working through the STEP plan, and everybody else receiving the 2% salary increase, and a net adjustment based on us budgeting for a full-time that ended up being a part-time, a family plan versus coming in as an individual. Zoning Board of Review, really no changes from current year. Again, we're changing that to stipends rather than being listed as part-time salaries, and the effect that it has as far as Social Security contributions. That completes the reviews through the zoning board. We have 2 additional departments that we'll jump on to, and that is, the next one is the library system. And Shirley's patiently waited with us here tonight and is available to answer any questions that council may have. And if you want to move to page N.
Steve, can I just ask you one question on the zoning and planning board?
Sure.
As with the Conservation Commission, is there any money set aside for educational seminars with those boards?
There isn't any money specifically set aside, but there's money available within the zoning and building office itself or within the planning department budget that could be used for that purpose. In fact, like with the Conservation Commission this year, since no funds were budgeted, Vin's finding the money in his planning department budget for that purpose. So we would do it the same way. Whenever we have board members that wish to attend for those type of training programs, we'll find the dollars available.
Is that true for the town council also? I mean, we've never attended
probably not.
anything. But I think maybe some of these educational seminars are worthwhile for some of the
Certainly, you've
issues that
got
we're
the-
facing these days.
And when you look at the town council, you've got, $50 available, and miscellaneous expenses, another
Is
$500.
that pizza?
So you've already got that. If you want to go someplace, as long as we approve it, you're all set.
Oh, man.
But we only pay one way.
One day.
The next time we have that tour, we're going to be pushing the bus. There's going to be no gas in it.
That's right.
No kidding. Okay.
Yeah, and there's $65,000 in contingency that could also be assigned for any of those type of purposes.
Good.
So yes, we can provide whatever education people are interested in, as long as it's in the town's best interest. That's money spent. Well, money well spent. Library administration. The library program starts on page N38, and N39 gives you a documentation on the revenue sources associated. The library program next year will have a cost of $1,171,116. There really are no major changes that are recommended with the library program. As I mentioned earlier, two key accounts, the $94,000 that's budgeted for books and publications, and the $18,000 that's budgeted for recreation equipment. I think it's $8,000 that's budgeted for recreation materials and supplies. We've provided the ability for the libraries to be able to account for those dollars by each of the library buildings itself. We're not showing you that in the budget document because there's no reason for us to show how they're distributing it, but this provides them with better control as to how the money's spent on each of the libraries, as well as to be able to show the library board exactly how their money is being expended for books and recreation equipment on a per library basis. They can assign budgets amounts of that $94,000 to the three accounts, and then they can subdivide that even further into juvenile collection, adult collections, periodicals, that type of thing. So the new accounting system will provide them with that type of flexibility and control that we haven't had in the past. Are there questions as far as library? Shirley, is there anything you'd like to present on behalf of the library board?
No, but I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Up to date, we have people waiting in line to use our computers?
At Peacedale, we do a reservation system, which we use during the summertime. It's always there available, but we only really need it during the summertime when we have the summer residents coming in, as well as the children for the summer reading program. Technology, we're doing pretty well. This is the first year. Last year was the first year we did not receive any computers from the Champlain Foundation. Up until last year, all our computers, all our servers are all funded by the Champlain Foundation. This year is the first year we haven't received any peripherals like receipt printers and barcode scanners. But last year, we did put in the budget for the first time, a chunk, $5,000, in this current year was put in for this year. In next year's proposed budget, we've got $6,000 to keep our technology up to date, because we do have 51 computers throughout our system, and we need to keep up to date. And, you know, we have so many people in town who don't have access to computers, so they need to come in to use them. I'm so glad to hear that the schools are looking to get all those computers in for the kids. I mean, that just really, I think it's a lot of money, but it's a fantastic thing to do. Ebook, you know, you always want to read stuff on your iPad. Well, ebooks are booming at the library. Last year, we circulated over about 11,100 ebooks. This year, through last Friday, we've circulated 10,700 ebooks. So the use is going up. And and now you can download it to your mobile devices, all different kinds of things. So,
With your library card, right?
yeah, with your library card, which is free, so no excuse.
Great.
Steve, Champlin's, anything in the capital budget this year or the near term coming up with the libraries that Champlin will be asked to help?
I'll let Shirley answer that
Yeah,
because she
Champlin
runs the
has,
grants.
has decreased its technology to public libraries because their feeling is that that's now become an operating expense, not something that's a capital. However, we do submit every year a capital request to the Champlin Foundations. And this year, in December, we got a check for $25,500 to upgrade the electrical systems, the electric lights at Hale and Kingston, which we now have contracts out. The same way we did Peacedale earlier in the year, now we'll do the other two branches, and we'll also have money to paint the fence at Kingston to kind of finish off that renovation there. So we do request every single year, we request some technology, some building needs from the Champlin Foundations, which is another reason why they're kind of backing off on technology, because more and more libraries are asking for more and more things for their buildings.
Cheryl, are you getting any major complaints with the lack of parking, the loss of the spaces at Peacedale, along with any parking issues over in Kingston?
Complaints are regular, more so in the summer because it was a nightmare last summer with the increased business. July is our busiest month. Parking was a nightmare. When we have book sales, lots of complaints throughout the last Peacedale book sale, no place to park. With the snow, spaces are less, so parking is tight. I mean, the police are over there, I don't know, every once in a while because someone bangs into somebody else. Just last week, we had a patron pull in and scrape the truck, the library's truck. You know, he hit, because people have a lot of SUVs and trucks here in town, which really takes up space in the lot. So yeah, it's a continuing problem.
Right.
People park on the street too, you know, fortunately we have that.
And how's the parking going up at the Kingston Library?
It's, you know, the same old, same though. Problems sometimes and not others. You know, it just depends on what the URI students are doing. But it's the same old thing. It's just, the space is just so limited, you know.
Right. Wish there was a way to resolve both those issues, you know, at both libraries with the
Yeah.
parking.
Yeah. But, you know, we have the usage, which is good.
Right. And the summer program for the kids to engage them to continue reading over the summer will take place?
Oh, all the time. And this year at Peacedale, we have a couple of new evening programs, a pajama story time once a month on a Monday, and a family reading time. The children's librarian takes care of it. Our children's librarian does. Yeah. Last
Any other
year,
questions?
I'll just mention one thing about the summer reading program. Last year, our children's librarian, Tina Latica, at Peacedale, started doing reading programs across in the park at the Neighborhood Guild, which was really very successful. So with the cooperation of Terry and Kathy, Tina's been going over there to read in the park, which is nice, and a little outreach.
Was there any connection with the Janet Gould walk with that book? I know that with the Guild, with the lighting of the Christmas tree, there were, you know, a path that you could read in memory of Janet Gould.
Oh, no, we didn't participate in that.
All right, other questions for Shirley? We thank you. Yeah,
Great. Thank you.
yeah. Great, thank you.
That brings us to the last account that we're looking at tonight, and that's Town Hall Operations. Town Hall Operations is recommended funding about $182,269. It's a reduction of about $89 from the current year. This is another one of the departments, I think you'll see a lot of the reassignment on values on utilities. In the past, we had budgeted utilities as one line item. Now what we're trying to do is to budget where we're looking at both the water fees, the wastewater fees, the natural gas fees, electricity, and fuel oils. That way, we've got far better control over where those costs are going. And once we can build a history on those, it'll make budget forecasting hopefully a little bit easier to do and with greater certainty. But having the expansion on the chart of accounts certainly is requiring a great deal more work effort, but I think it'll provide a better information flow as to why we spend the dollars that we spend. Since the operating cost of utilities has become so much more of a cost in each of our buildings, being able to isolate those costs is important so that we can look at the things that we've done both successfully, like the bringing of natural gas here, bringing of natural gas to the libraries, natural gas to the police station, for us changing over the lights in the libraries, the lights changes over at the police station, for us to be able to see what type of energy savings we can generate. So we've been a leader in the state in terms of the makeover of our buildings. What we're trying to do now is to have a better idea as to what the individual components are costing us, rather than just looking at the bottom line utilities. And you can see the changes that we've made, where we've taken a $24,000 budget and we've made adjustments on that for each of the different accounts. And we're also changing over where some of the accounts were budgeted for fuel oil, where it was actually a natural gas when we made the changes last year. So a lot of those different changes, they're probably things that most people wouldn't see or care about, but I want the council to be aware that of the extra effort that's being made for cost control purposes. Yeah, Jim?
Yeah, back to the town hall again. Where do things like a new rug, you know, we've talked about that now and then, some of the seating, maybe reupholstering or new seating, you know, some of the chip, the paint up there in the windows, but where does that all fall?
Any money that comes out of, any money that we have left at the end of the year with the town hall operations, we'll recommend to you a transfer into the town hall capital reserve. The town hall capital reserve at this point has capital dollars available that can be expended. What's the value? I don't recall what the value is at this point, but we've got dollars available for those type of purposes. This year, we repaired that dormer. Each of the dormers were done. The roof over the personnel manager's office is
Your
being
office,
done.
yep.
All of those things are being done using those capital funds, Jim. And, you know, if we need to do additional repairs in the town hall, that's where it's coming out of. We also have, council approves on an annual basis HVAC hourly rates and plumbing rates, and then what we do is, like last week, there was a problem with the restroom on the first floor. That's being repaired. It doesn't come to the council level, but it'll be repaired either through this budget, and if it's a major item, then it'll be repaired through the capital reserve. I think there's about $110,000 right now that may be set aside for that. Big projects that we're looking at in the future are listed in the capital budget, and you've got a capital budget item, I think, of either 15,000, 10 or 15,000 that's set aside for town hall. And what we're looking at is probably a repaving or a surface coating of this parking lot that's out here. We're looking at repainting of this room or portions of it. And one of the other things that we want to look at is the potential removal of the front set of seats here, or both sets there, because we don't have a lot of people sitting in those areas, and it would provide a much larger space for the conduct of these type of meetings without having the crowding that we have at this point. Balance is about $206,000 that's available right now with town.
Whoa.
But
When was the
again,
last
some of the
time-
major projects that you're talking about would, you know, parking lot alone would be quite expensive.
When's the last time that this rug was changed?
When this room was put into place. So that's, yeah, we've got carpeting in 2015 that we were looking at in here. But when we deal with that, we may deal with the carpet, and it would give us an opportunity to move the chairs at the same time.
Great.
The only thing we don't want to do is to make it unwelcoming, where it looks like at the regular meeting, the council's up there, and you got the public that's got a setback that far. But from a use of this small, the well is just not large enough when we get the council and the school committee or the planning board, and we're trying to also be able to use the camera without getting the back of heads when people are sitting at the table on a two-sided table. So there's those type of things that need to be taken into consideration, because this room's in use probably 3 nights of the week. Any other questions? Meg?
All I want to do is just make a comment. Capital budgets aside, because we know what capital budgets encompass, but I have to say, the town hall operation budget, being said, if this does get approved, this is a relatively lean budget. And if you guys live by this, I'm going to personally shake your hand at the end of next year. I'm not kidding you. This is a very lean budget.
Well, Jeff's very frugal, and some people think he's deaf when complaints go to him, but he does get some of the things done.
Yeah, this is a budget to live by. If every town or city encompassed or embraced some of these expenses the way they operate, holy moly, the state would be in a much better shape. This is very lean, very good. A lot to be proud of. Congratulations on this.
We try with all of our accounts. That concludes the number of items that we're supposed to review this evening.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask if there's any other matters of interest and concern with the town council. Wants to bring anything up?
I'm here.
And then I will just open it to the microphone if anybody would like to make a comment. And with that said, I would just like to highlight, a few of the points that I'm leaving with today. Thank you to the staff, for all being here tonight. And welcome aboard, Trish. And Steve, it just, never amazes us to see how this budget unfolds and is put together. And some of the things that I'm leaving with tonight is, a 1.2% property tax levy increase is, I'm sure compared to other districts around us, we're very fortunate to be looking at something like that, only up 4 cents. I appreciate the schools with their decrease with the 8 cents. With what they have moved forward. And I'm leaving with, this staff that you have, let me just finish this one, then you can correct me. With the staff that you have portrayed with this budget, I really do see, with prior years, being 8 years on the town council, just an extreme analysis of how each department is spending. And now you can correct me on the 8 cents.
The 8 cents is on the debt service. They're not losing anything on operations. It's the debt that's going down on the schools. But you bring up a very important point, is that the budget development really involves every single person at the supervisory and the management level. And the narratives that are written involve each of the different departments to look both backwards at what they've been able to accomplish, as well as forward as to what they look to accomplish. And you've got an excellent staff. I mean, they do an excellent job for us. And as I said in my budget message, that the work that Trish has been able to do in the development of the accounting system and in the restatement of the budget document is very important to us, because what it is going to allow us to do is to build a history on those codes that will be able to document to anybody who's interested how we spend money and why we spend money. And, our objective is to try to reduce our costs as low as possible and to share services with other communities if possible. Because what we want to see is the least amount of taxes that people have to pay, particularly during down economic times. And we still aren't seeing good economic times. Of recent, we've seen major changes in the level of development that's occurring in the community, which is great news. But that needs to continue rather than just be an isolated 6-month period. So until we do that, we've got to try to restrain what our cost of operations are to minimize the impact. If we can minimize the impact on the average house to $12, and still be able to preserve all of the services that we've continued to provide, then I think we've met our objective. And that's what we're trying to accomplish in terms of our presentation over the next 3 nights.
My last two comments was the collection rate for the property tax at 92.02%. I mean, we've just maintained that. Absolutely wonderful. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the wonderful audit that we've gotten. You know, the other Thursday night, we had a presentation, and we have strong financial stability here in South Kingstown. So thank you to all and the whole staff here. Any other comments?
No, and a great bond rating, too.
Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries 400. We are adjourned at 9:10. Thank you.
Thinking of.